Welcome to the deep dive. Okay, so there's this palpable tension many people are feeling, right? Especially somewhere like Los Angeles. You see the headlines, ICE enforcement ramping up, federal agents, riot gear, pulling people from their homes. It's intense.
It really is.
And well, what if this isn't just policy? What if it's something deeper? Today we're diving into this really provocative piece by Jaime Hoerricks, PhD. It's called The Siege at Home: Myth, Militarization, and the Lessons of a Guerrilla Statesman.
Yeah, it's quite a title.
It is. Our mission really is to unpack the author's claims about American founding myths, political reactions right now, and some pretty surprising history lessons they bring in.
Okay, so diving straight in, the author uses that word occupation. They argue it's not just rhetoric.
Right.
They say the usual political takes, from the center right to far right. Yeah. They offer this flat logic that just doesn't cut it, doesn't explain what's happening. And it directly challenges those founding myths: freedom, democracy, peacekeeping. The author suggests these were more like instruction.
Instructions? How so?
Like conditioning, getting people to accept control as just, order, compliance as patriotism, and seeing militarization as simply protection.
Okay.
The piece argues these were basically elite declarations, by men who saw land as power and, critically, people as property.
Wow.
So these IC raids now, the Medicaid issues, the hollowing out of public institutions, the author sees this as the fulfillment, the playing out of those original myths, the empire turning inward, as they put it.
That idea of the empire turning inward, that's unsettling, and it gets, even sharper when the author looked at the budget.
Oh, absolutely. The funding for IC, it's staggering.
They point out IC gets more money than the entire Russian military.
More than the Marines.
Yeah. And, pointedly, more than programs for clothing, feeding, healing people. The author doesn't see this as, an oversight. They call it an architecture. A deliberate choice to turn federal power inward. And they label it preparation for siege.
And that word siege, they're very clear. It isn't a metaphor here.
Right.
It's described as a lived experience. Surveillance, occupation, forced removal. Federal agents, unmarked cars, masks, tactical gear.
Outside schools, inside hospitals.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Around courthouses. The author stresses this isn't just about paperwork.
It's a message.
It's sending a message that you can be taken, that no place is safe. That's the quote.
Okay, but the counter-argument is always, well, it's the law, or they didn't do it the right way. How does the author handle that?
They tackle it head on.
Yeah.
They argue this wave of raids is broad, aggressive, and punitive, not just routine enforcement. They give examples: kids being watched, pregnant women detained, people picked up going to appointments they were actually ordered to attend.
So it undermines that just following the law argument.
Completely. And the framing is powerful. This is not law. It is power masquerading as order.
Ooh.
It is fear weaponized through procedure. It is bureaucracy sharpened into a blade. That's the author's language.
Bureaucracy as a blade.
Yeah. This colder violence, they say, it lives in spreadsheets. It gets voted on. Legislation maybe no one read. And then it just appears. Armed men.
Quietly.
And crucially, they say even in supposedly blue states, supposedly safe cities, the occupation is already here.
Not wearing red hats, they say.
But blue jeans, disappearing people into systems presented as neutral. The bottom line for the author: this is not a failure of the system. It is the system. Funded, armored, deployed.
That's a fundamental challenge. Okay, let's shift to the critique of political leadership. The author contrasts local officials' actions, a mayor confronting agents, council members getting zip-tied with the governor. They really single out Governor Newsom, don't they?
Oh, they really do. They basically say Newsom is rehearsing, not resisting. Yeah. Every press conference, every legal filing, every sort of half-hearted declaration of California sovereignty. The author sees it as just lines on his resume.
We're higher office.
Exactly. They argue he wants to inherit the very machine that is terrorizing his state, like an emperor in a better suit, managing oppression, making it more palatable to the NPR crowd.
That's quite the accusation.
It is.
Yeah.
And the author points to what's not happening. No calls for mass noncompliance. No state agencies deployed to shield people. No state resources mobilized for protection.
Stay calm, trust the process.
Which the author flatly calls abandonment.
So it's presented as political performance over real action, and this connects to local police too.
Yes, that's a key detail. Every city police force in California, the P states, has pledged non-interference with ICE, Federal jurisdiction, they say.
So if someone calls 911 seeing neighbors seized by armed men?
Dispatchers dismiss it. Not an emergency. The author finds that phrase, to protect and to serve, feels like a cruel joke in this context. People are just managed, watched, surveilled, abandoned.
And the analysis of Newsom's silence is, well, brutal.
It really is.
Yeah.
They conclude he's not calling for civil disobedience, not instructing state agencies to intervene, not raising the cost of federal overreach.
Why, according to the author?
In their view, his calculation is that silence is safer for his ambitions. Boldness is risky. He's prepping to lead the nation, so wait it out.
Wait for the screams to fade. That's heavy. Okay, this leads into a really fascinating, maybe difficult part of the piece, connecting these current events to how we learn history.
Right, the critique of the standard modern world history curriculum.
Yeah, the one presenting U.S. history as this inevitable march toward freedom, where empire is always something, other countries do.
But the author argues students are living a totally different reality, a different syllabus.
A city under siege, economic problems, food insecurity, these federal raids.
And the author says they know viscerally that the textbook is lying.
So the question becomes, how do you help young people make sense of that disconnect when reality clashes with the official story?
The author's answer is, look elsewhere. Dig into the buried archives of resistance. Find histories that weren't included in the main curriculum.
Stories of different kinds of power.
Exactly. Models rooted in survival rather than domination. Different blueprints, basically.
Which brings us to Kim Il-sung. This is probably the most unexpected part for many listeners.
Definitely. The author presents him not as the usual caricature, but as a resistance fighter.
Hardened in Manchuria, fighting Japanese occupation.
Yes. Coming from the front lines of colonial war, not some foreign capital. Building trust with ordinary people, poor people, workers, peasants through shared risk and what the author calls revolutionary clarity.
And before taking power, he was already redistributing land, dismantling old structures, supporting local committees.
The author argues his early legitimacy was relational. It grew out of survival under siege. It's a radically different framing than we usually get.
Absolutely. And how does the author connect this back to, say, a young person in LA today?
They ask, how do you explain that the same government, gutting school funding, disappearing neighbors, militarizing the city, failing on climate change, is the same government you're taught is the model of freedom?
It's a direct contradiction.
It is. And the story of Kim Il-sung matters here, the author says, not his later state mythology, but the material record of what he did before he solidified power.
As a contrast to leadership based on performance and polls.
Precisely. They call for the full sentence of history, like acknowledging the U.S. and Soviet Union divided Korea without Korean consent, then fought a war over it, adding that context.
Okay, and this exploration continues with Juche, another term most Westerners probably know only as a punchline.
Right. The author argues Juche wasn't just a slogan, it was a survival plan.
Born from what?
From bomb craters, from total war, betrayal, siege. The piece argues North Korea's isolation wasn't pride initially. It was because every bridge to connection was burned, largely by U.S. actions, occupation, containment.
So Juche emerges from necessity.
That's the argument, a material need. How do you grow food when ports are blocked? Develop medicine when imports are cut? It was about figuring out how to survive without relying on those who had already proven they'd rather see you destroyed than independent.
The author acknowledges it wasn't perfect.
Right. Oh, yeah. They don't gloss over its own violences, but they stress its roots were material, memory, continuity under fire, an ideology forged by necessity.
So what's the relevance for us? How does this Juche reinterpretation connect to California, for example?
The parallel drawn is striking. California, seen as progressive, innovative, but, the author argues, not self-sufficient.
Oh, so?
Fragile food supplies.
Yeah.
An overstretched power grid, built, they claim, more to protect corporate liability, like cutting power in heat waves to avoid lawsuits than to serve people reliably.
Water issues, too. Diverted, poisoned.
Collapsing healthcare. All these essential systems, the author says, are federally entangled, and that means federally vulnerable.
So the stark conclusion is?
We're not ready for what's coming, and our leaders are not preparing us. Juche, in its earliest form, the author contends, was about refusing to die quietly under someone else's plan. Self-determination under pressure.
These are definitely challenging perspectives. The author anticipates pushback, right, from people who haven't questioned the standard history or who've benefited from the system.
Absolutely. They acknowledge that for many, the idea of the U.S. as the aggressor, the oppressor, the occupier is almost unthinkable.
There's a personal element, too, isn't there?
Yes, very poignant. The author's adoptive father was a decorated Korean War vet. He believed he fought for freedom.
And the author feels telling this different version of history
Is honoring him by telling the truth, the one he was never told, that the war wasn't really about Korea's freedom, but more about U.S. dominance after World War II. That's a tough thing to grapple with.
It really is. The piece argues we were basically trained to ridicule North Korea.
See it as bizarre, backward, while swallowing our own propaganda.
Without learning about the context. The scorched earth, the chemical fire, the starvation from sanctions.
Exactly. A much darker history than the simplified enemy image allows.
So, Juche, dismissed as a joke,
Was actually about surviving a world that tried to wipe you off the map. It offered a model, the author says, for life under siege. Decentralized governance, collective infrastructure, self-determined narrative.
and these aren't inherently tools of tyranny.
Not in their essence, the author argues. They're the strategies of people who know no one is coming to save them.
Okay, so boiling it down, what's the takeaway for people facing these situations now, if Newsom's press conferences aren't the answer?
The author points towards things like mutual aid, local food systems, solar microgrids, grassroots solutions.
Answers from the bottom up, not the top down.
Precisely. And that provocative question hangs there. What if, instead of waiting to be saved, we prepared to survive?
What if we stopped ridiculing places that resisted and maybe learned from them?
Not because they're perfect models, but because they know what it means to be left behind and survive anyway.
So after digging into this piece by Jaime Hoerricks, this idea of the siege at home, it feels different, maybe more insidious.
Yeah, no howitzers, right. Instead, it's convoys of unmarked SUVs filled with anonymous shock troops.
No official martial law, but power shutoffs in a heat wave.
No foreign flag flying, but the author warns, don't be fooled. This is what invasion looks like now.
Which leads to the final crucial question the piece poses. What kind of leader is needed now, under siege?
Not someone seeking federal approval or crafting language for donors or just rehearsing for the next step up the ladder.
Something else entirely.
Yeah. Leaders emerging from the community, speaking the language of grief, of resolve, of shared risk. Leaders organizing for actual survival needs, food, shelter, care, protection.
And this is where the author brings back those historical figures we're often taught to fear or dismiss. Kim Il-sung, Mao, Ho Chi Minh, Sankara, Traoré, Mandela.
Right. Highlighting them as people who, in their contexts, redistributed land, food, power, who didn't wait for permission to protect their people.
They didn't build careers, they built futures. That's a powerful line.
It really is. And it leaves you, the listener, with this thought. When your community feels like it's under siege, the real question isn't whether resistance is polite, it's whether it's real.
Does it materially help people survive and build something else?
Exactly. The history matters, not to romanticize, but to remember what's possible, to recover strategies, because, as the author powerfully concludes,
what we need now isn't a president. It's protection, it's preparation, it's each other.
a challenging but perhaps necessary perspective for our times.